Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all well. So I really wanted to have a go at making some horns. I've never made them in this way before, so I thought I'd show you how I get on with it and also just throw in a bonus little makeup tutorial as well. So I started by wrapping some scrunched up kitchen towel in some kitchen foil and then making it into that horn shape. Then I heated up some Warbler, which is a thermoplastic with a heat gun, and then I wrapped that around the base shape. I bulked out any areas that needed it, you know, if the shape was a little bit wobbly. And then I also blended the edges in slightly with a little metal spatula. You can also use a Dremel on Warbler once the plastic has cooled down and set, but this was enough for me this time since I wanted some texture in the horns anyway, which is why I used Warbler in the first place. Next, I marked out where I wanted the ridges to be, making sure they lined up with the other horn. Generally, when I'm doing something where there's two things that need to be even, I would go about doing them both at the same time, so I can make alterations as I go along. Say for example, if you're making a horn or sculpting an ear or something, you get to the end of one and you realise it's completely different to the first one you did. I find it's a lot harder to kind of fix and touch up, so I like to work on both of them at the same time. But for this project, because I was filming the process, I was using the first one as my practice. So then I heat up the Warbler and then I use a spatula and a little sculpting tool just to press it in, and then I just continue to do this all the way down to the bottom of the horn. Next I added a bit more of a curve to the horn. I just heated up where I wanted it to start bending and then just bent it a little. I guess you could also do this at the beginning when you're making the initial shape with the foil instead. It's up to you. Then I removed all of the foil and the tissue from the inside. For the angle of the base, I just kind of messed around with it until it worked with my head shape. Initially I was going to have the horns coming out of my forehead, so that's what I was using as like a reference. I was holding it against my head and seeing if it came out at the right kind of angle, and just altering it until I was happy with it. I did have to change my idea though, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but for now, moving on to the paint. So to paint these guys, I used acrylic paint, and I think people usually seal Warbler to make the surface smoother, but I did a little patch test and I actually preferred how it looked without a base of glue or whatever base people use. I quite liked the texture it had. So I started with a dark brown base colour, and I'm sorry, but it's gonna look like it's just gonna look like a poop for a while, so try to look past that. It gets better, I promise. Then I mixed raw umber and white together and brushed this over the higher points. And once it dries, it gets a lot darker, so I did the same again but with a bit more white. Then you'll see on my other horn, I dirtied it up a little, and I did this with some watered down burnt umber, and then just brushed that over top. So like I said, initially I wanted to have the horns coming out of my forehead, but it didn't end up working with the hairline of the wig that I wanted to use, and I didn't really want to mess with the wig because they're quite expensive, so I changed my idea instead. But I will show you how I would have attached it that way anyway. So after painting, I filled the horn with cotton wool, and then I applied a few layers of latex, liquid latex over the bottom. And then since the horns are so lightweight, they would easily just stick straight onto the forehead, and then you could apply a small ring of scar wax around the base, or you can make your own sculpt and mold for slush latex or gelatin or silicone or something if you're feeling fancy. But I changed my plan and I ended up attaching it through the wig instead, which caused a couple of days of trial and error, but it was worth it. I feel like I've learned a lot. So after removing the cotton wool and the latex, I filled the horns with expanding foam and I left that to expand and set. And then I cut off the excess and I created a base with the Warbler and then blended it into the rest of the horn and repainted it. Now, the reason I made this base is because I was going to try to attach the horns with some snap fastenings, you know, the kind that you get on jackets and clothes and stuff. I was going to sew one into the wig and then glue one onto the base of the horn, but it didn't work out because the hair was too thick, so they just popped right off. Now I know there are easier ways to do this, you can just attach horns to a headband, but I really wanted them to look more authentic, and the placement would have had to have been different if I'd worn them on a headband. They'd have to be further back, and since I already had to change them from being on the forehead, I wasn't going to be defeated and have them even further back. So next I decided to make this little wire contraption with these prongs that I could push up through the wig into the horn, and it wouldn't cause too much damage to the wig because it could just go through the lace. So I cut the wire down and I set them in place in this base of warbler. Then you can feed it through the wig. Imagine there's a wig between these two pieces, and then you can push it up into the horn. I had to heat the warbler for the wire to go through, but in this case you really wouldn't need that warbler base. The issue I had with this method is that I couldn't get the position correct, and my horns kept looking wonky when I put the wig on because the little wire contraption was actually pretty solid. I couldn't really bend it around much or manipulate it once the horns were on. So finally I ended up making this little device instead. I cut a strip of warbler and then shaped that to my head underneath the wig, and then I marked through the wig where the horns needed to come out, just roughly where I wanted them, like the center of them to be. And then I attached two little wire antennae and fed them through the wig, and then I fed the wire through the center of the horn. And because it's only one wire this time, it's not four little prongs, it's not quite as set, so it was easy to kind of bend it into shape and make sure they weren't wonky, but it was still quite stable because it went all the way up into the horn. But that's it for my horn making adventure. I love prop making and fabrication and stuff. Are we down for more videos like this? I'd love to do more videos like this. So for the makeup, I wanted to go for a creepy, cute kind of vibe, like meeting halfway between beauty and scary. So pretty base makeup and lips, and then messy eyeshadow. So I'm starting with a primer and a foundation and basically doing my usual routine for my base. My skin is doing pretty well recently, so I've been enjoying lighter coverage. So today I tried out this Sara Velvet Sheer Foundation. I'm just going to bounce that in with a damp beauty blender. It's not a beauty blender, it's one of the Real Techniques sponges. I can't remember what they're called. Usually I would apply concealer next, but I'm not going to bother with concealing any darkness around my eyes because I'm going to be adding some dark circles there anyway. So now I'm going to go ahead and set that foundation with a translucent powder, and then moving on to bronzer, I'm using the Too Faced Chocolate Soleil bronzer, which is slightly too dark for me, but whatever. For my brows, I'm using my usual Soap & Glory brow pencil for the overall shape, and then I'm going to fix up the edges with some concealer, and then I used a brow pomade from Anastasia Beverly Hills just to make the start of my brows nice and thick and fluffy looking, just by adding a few like thin hair-like strokes. Then I'm going to make them look even fluffier by setting the hairs upwards. So one of my favourite products for adding darkness around the eyes for looks like this is the Bend I Bruise wheel. There's a light purple and a dark purple, so I add the light one first and then I punch it up a bit with the darker shade. I apply this with a little synthetic blending brush from Sigma. It's the one I usually use to apply my cream like concealers or colour correctors underneath my eyes. But if you don't want to use a brush, if you don't want to messy up a brush, it blends out really easily with your fingers as well. Next, I'm going to throw on a bit of contour and highlight, so I'm using a taupey shade underneath my bottom lip and around my nose. I don't really change the shape too much, I just like to add some definition there since the flat foundation colour like kind of flattens everything, so this just ends up looking a little bit better in photographs. And then I'm using my usual highlight, it's just an eyeshadow from a Ciate palette because it's ridiculous and nothing compares and I love him. Then finally for the skin, I'm going to add a pink cream blush just to kind of stick with that dewy, glowy look we've got going on. So moving on to the eyes, I started by lining my upper and lower waterline with a red liner, and unlike my last video where I did red eyeliner, I'm getting it right up into the inner corner because I want the eyes to look kind of, I guess, irritated and sore and demonic this time. Next, I'm running a red eyeshadow all the way underneath the eyes, and I'm really smoking that out because I'm going to apply a black eyeshadow closer to the lash line later on, and I want to make sure you'll still be able to see the red at the edges. And then I'm also going to apply that in, what would you call this area? Under the brow, coming down to like just above the crease. Then I decided to go for a simple smoked out black on the lid. I forgot to apply base, so here I am failing miserably at applying a black eyeshadow and it looking awful. So I went over with a black eyeliner and then went ahead and applied the black eyeshadow over top. Since I only wanted to apply one colour on the lid and not get too fancy, I chose a shadow with some glitter in it just to add a bit of interest. And as for the shape, I'm just kind of pulling it out into a super soft wing. Underneath the eye, I'm just running that black eyeliner all the way across underneath, and then I'm going to go over the top again with the black eyeshadow and blending that out slightly. Now that I've added all of that darkness, the dark circles around the eyes didn't look quite as strong as I wanted them to, so I'm also going to punch up that purple with the same product that I used before, the darker shade, not the light purple. Then I thought I was finished with the top of the eyes, so I finished off with a brow bone highlight, but I do add a bit more darkness in a little bit. Next, I'm going to drag some of that eyeshadow down the cheeks. It's very Queen of Pain, Fallen Angel inspired, that kind of thing. And you can drag this down with a brush or you can use your finger. Just try to get it going straight down or it can look a little bit off. So then I decided there still wasn't enough darkness around the eyes, so I applied a black cream colour from Anastasia Beverly Hills and then popped the same eyeshadow over the top, but it just makes a huge difference. It's so much darker and there's just more of that glitter as well. For my lashes, I used the style Whiplash from SocialEyes. They're 3/4 lashes, so they work really nicely with that kind of pulled out eye shape we've got going on. Finally, moving on to the lips, I tried a few different reds before settling on Ladyballs from Too Faced. Unfortunately, using a red did end up making the red eyeshadow around the eyes look a bit more pink, so maybe using a black or a deep purple for the lips would help avoid that. But it's fine, I committed and I love how the red lipstick looked with the hair, so it wasn't a big deal. I'm just throwing ideas at you. But then that's it. I really hope you enjoyed watching this video. Let me know what you think. I don't know why you'd be recreating this one, but if you do, I'd love to see it. So make sure you hit me up on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and all that good stuff. As always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll speak to you next time.